Welcome back, everybody, to the Calaveria podcast, your one-stop shop for all things supernatural. I'm your host, Jose.
And I'm Samantha.
And that's right, you guys. We are back with another episode, a Folklore Friday episode, as you guys may have seen by the title. And if you guys are new here, I mean, this is the Calaveria, your one-stop shop for all things supernatural, right? As I just said in the beginning. And yeah, we are here to share with you guys a very spooky episode because, you know, we're in that spooky season. We are very close to Halloween. And as of the day that this episode comes out, it's only like days away. So, I mean, I'm excited for it. So how about you, Samantha?
I'm also excited for it. I can't wait.
Yeah, I mean, even though it's on a Monday, kind of sucks. I mean, it's still like, you know, there's never a bad day to be spooky.
Mm-hmm. Are you dressing up or nah?
Honestly, I don't think so, just because, I mean, me and Lolly don't really have anything planned, you know, to go out really like that. So I think we're just going to kind of stay home and watch movies and stuff like that. I know she has her spooky socks and all those things, so I'm sure she's going to dress up like that. But I'm not, though. Are you?
I have a costume planned. I'm going to be Chowder from the show. Me and my friend are just
really?
going to... Yeah. I'm making the hat.
What are you doing it out of?
I'm just crocheting the hat, so, you know, out of yarn.
Oh, so you're actually making it yourself like that? Oh, that's pretty cool, yeah. For those of you guys that don't know, Samantha actually does crochet. I mean, if you guys follow us on Instagram, Samantha's account is tagged on there as well. She has like a crochet account, or it's like her account that she does, but she's pretty good, so you guys check her out. But that's really cool. I didn't know that you were doing that. So, I mean, I want to see some pictures.
But other than spooky season, guys, remember, it is also voting time.
Yes, that is right.
Right now, you recently got your ballots, I'm pretty sure, through the mail if you have that. But yeah, guys, go ahead and vote.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's vote counts. I know Samantha mentioned that most people are starting to get their ballots in the mail. I mean, we're in California, so every single person receives a ballot in the mail, regardless if you want it or not, which, in my opinion, it's really good because, I mean, it's not just like most people, or not even going to say most people, but, you know, there's political party that likes to think that, oh, this voting by mail or all these different things like these take-home ballots are bad or whatever the case is. But, you know, these actually help out people like the elderly or this and that. Like, it's a good thing. I know personally. Yeah, I don't want to freaking go on election day to go wait in a big-ass line for no reason. Like, no. I mean, that's generally what we've been doing forever. But if you guys have that option to request it, or if it's too late, I mean, I don't necessarily know how it works in other states. I just know because California, like I said, we get sent one in the mail. Be sure to vote. I mean, it's going to matter. If you guys haven't realized it yet, we have our preferences, obviously. We've talked about this before. We know we believe in COVID, all these different things. Yes, you know, it's no secret. But yeah, I mean, your vote matters. This is the time, like, it's really, really counts. These are the midterm elections. Even though it's not this big presidential election, it's going to matter. These people are going to be in office for the next 4 years. And if it's a senator, 6 years. Or if it's your governor, like, they're going to make decisions for the state that you live in. And if you are living in one of these states, specifically, you know, these red states, if you are a woman, for one, they are going to be attacking your rights as a woman. So you guys need to get out there and vote. Vote for your rights. I promise you, your voice does matter. For anybody trying to put you down, or if you think, like, my vote's not going to matter, I promise you it does. If you guys don't believe me, I mean, just look back at the last election, 2020 election, right? I mean, nobody knew Georgia was going to come out blue, and look what happened. That's the power of voting. Everybody's vote counts. Also, be sure to do all the research on your measures, right? Are these different, like, voting initiatives? Don't just look at the commercials and say, oh, I see this commercial all the time, so I'm voting no on prop this, prop that. Like, do the research.
Make sure when you're also researching, look at who's supporting those, who's funding those campaigns, everything like that. And if someone that you think you don't support or whatever, just make sure to do your research. It takes a simple Google search if you want to look.
I've been noticing a lot lately. I know as of last year, I remember this guy, or not last year, I'm sorry, but the last time that we had a vote, like something to vote for, there's a TikTok account that goes through the different measures. I know specifically this guy would talk about all the different measures that we have going on in California. He breaks it down. So if you're too lazy to do it yourself, I get it, I understand. Go on TikTok, just search up, California measure this or prop this. I'm sure this guy is going to break it down. You'll find somebody that talks about it. So there's different things that you can do to get self-informed. Like I promise you, you don't have to, do tons and tons of research, be, Googling for like 2 hours just to find out exactly what's going on. It's there, guys. The information is out there. Just be sure to read everything, though, because sometimes a lot of these people want to kind of like hide in like this kind of not like deceitful language is basically what I want to say, where they make you think like, oh, this is going to be good for you because of this reason, when in reality it's going to harm somebody else for another reason, right? I know in California there's a big thing going around with like the gambling and the native tribes, and I have not done my research on it, so I can't come to a conclusion, but I know one side says it's going to benefit and it's going to bring all these like, nice things and help the tribes out and all these different things, right? Address homelessness, while the other side that says to vote no on it says it actually damages these tribes, which, I mean, it's very confusing. I know it's very easy to kind of just look at a commercial and choose one side, but please, please, please do your research. Go out there and vote. Your voice matters. We recommend that everybody that is of voting age go out and vote. I promise you, you're not too cool, because when the time comes that you lose your rights, or somebody that you know, that you love, you look up to, whatever the case is suffering because of something that you knew maybe you could have gone out and made a difference for, you're going to feel it, and it's going to affect you whether you believe it or not. So do the right thing. Go out and vote. I know we went on a tangent right there, but this is very important, you guys. But another important thing that we have to talk about is our Halloween episode.
So yeah, guys, we're doing a Halloween episode special, I guess you could say, since it's going to be just an extra episode we're doing, because usually we'll do episodes every other week, but this is going to be for next week. So yeah, it's going to be right on Halloween for y'all to listen to. Yeah,
so I mean, you guys are in for a treat, right? You guys are getting basically like 2 episodes within like less than a week, because when this comes out, it's coming out on the 28th, so Halloween is 3 days later, so you guys are going to get 2 episodes right there. So, I mean, what more could you ask for? That's a Halloween treat for you guys. So be sure to look out for that. And if there's nothing else, without further ado, let's introduce today's topic. And like I said before, we have a Folklore Friday episode, and this is on El Silbón. The legend of El Silbón originates in Venezuela and Colombia, and is primarily associated with Los Llanos region. There are many different variations of the legend depending on who you ask. One iteration tells of a spoiled boy who always wanted things his way. One day, the boy requested to eat deer, and the father, trying to please his spoiled son, agreed to go out and hunt for a deer to bring back just for him. This is where the story begins to vary from person to person. It is said that the father would return but without the meat his son requested. This would spark a fire in the spoiled son, and he then grabbed his father's hunting knife and stabbed him to death. The boy's mother and grandfather would soon find the father's dead body and quickly come to the conclusion that the son was responsible. It was at this moment that the grandfather grabbed the boy and tied him to a tree and began to whip him as to punish him for his cruel act. The grandfather was said to then spread either lemon juice or hot peppers on the boy's wounds, but he wasn't done there. The grandfather made the boy carry a sack full of his father's bones and cursed him away, saying, "Eso no se le hace a su padre, maldito eres para toda la vida," which translates to, "You should not have done that to your father. You will be damned for the rest of your life." The boy may have thought that this was the end of it, but he would soon be mistaken, as he found 2 rabid dogs sent by his grandfather chasing after him. Another variation says that the father was out hunting for deer. It soon became late, and the boy grew frustrated and asked his mother why it was taking so long, to which the mother recommended the boy try to find his father. The spoiled boy was angry and left with a sack, all the while whistling as he set out to find his father. He soon found him and noticed he was returning empty-handed. The father began to apologize to his son, but infuriated even more, the boy stabbed his father with a hunting knife, disemboweling him and cutting the flesh off of his body. He then filled the sack he was carrying with his father's bones and the meat he cut off of his body. He returned home and told his mother that his father would be back later, and gave her the meat from the sack. The mother began to cook the meat, but soon grew skeptical and began to ask her son about his father. The boy confessed to what he had done, and in shock, the mother told the boy's grandfather, who grabbed him and tied him up to a tree and whipped him till his skin tore. The grandfather then spread hot peppers on his wounds and poured alcohol over them. The grandfather cursed him, saying that he would be doomed to walk Los Llanos forever, carrying his sins on his back. In one final act, the grandfather released 2 rabid dogs that would ultimately rip the boy apart. Another iteration tells of a boy who was a hard worker with a strict family. The family was so strict on him because they strived for him to be noble. One fateful day, the boy's father came home and began to accuse his wife of cheating on him. The father was said to be very violent, and this situation would bring out the worst in him. The two began to argue, and it soon went south. The boy's mother would end up losing her life at the hands of her husband. The boy would find his dead mother and become enraged. He searched for his father, and upon finding him, he disemboweled him out of revenge. The boy's grandfather would soon find out about the boy's actions, and he decided to take matters into his own hands. He tied the boy to a pole and began whipping him, and then proceeded to pour alcohol all over his wounds. After whipping him, the grandfather let 2 rabid dogs loose to attack his grandson and cursed him to carry his father's remains in a sack forever. Cursed to carry his father's remains for the rest of eternity, many would report sightings of a very tall and skinny being, ranging anywhere from 6 to 19 feet tall, in old tattered clothes and an old straw hat, roaming Los Llanos, carrying a sack all the while whistling a familiar tune. This is how he earned the name El Silbón, or the Whistler. El Silbón's whistle is said to have different meanings. It is said that if you hear his whistle nearby, he is in fact far away. But should it sound far away, it just might be too late. Many view El Silbón as an omen that either you or a loved one will be next to go. El Silbón has been known to target drunks and womanizers specifically. Should he run into a drunk, El Silbón will cut a hole into their stomach and suck the alcohol out of them, then proceed to take out the drunk's bones one by one through the very hole he created. By taking the bones of his victims, El Silbón curses the soul of his victim to wander after him, keeping them from passing on to the other side. Womanizers don't have it any easier though, as El Silbón is known to rip their limbs apart and add them to his sack of remains. El Silbón has been known to either go into one's house or sit outside of it and begin to count the bones within his sack, all the while whistling his familiar tune. If more than one person can hear his whistling, then all is well. But should you find yourself being the only one to hear his menacing whistle, you won't live to see the morning. It has been said that during the times of drought, El Silbón will not hunt, and should you find him sitting on the trees, know that you will be safe for many weeks to come. But should it rain, know that El Silbón is out to hunt. Despite how terrifying he may seem, there are ways to combat El Silbón. One way is to make sure you always have a dog by your side as he stays away from barking dogs. Another is to carry a whip as it reminds him of the punishment for killing his father. Finally, carrying chili peppers also repels El Silbón away from his would-be victim. El Silbón's story is tragic, no doubt, but if you hear his whistle, you just might face a fate far worse than his. Alright, so that is the legend of El Silbón. So Samantha, what do you think?
You know, like, I was listening to that. I've heard of his legend, his story, you know. And I think it's very interesting that in 2 of the stories you told that he is a spoiled brat. He is described to be a literal brat to his family, kind of just being arrogant, you know. And I find that very interesting because to me, I really like the story where he's like protecting his mother, where he's like upset that she's being attacked and whatever. But
yeah, I know when I was doing my research, there was a lot of different variations, which I mentioned in there. And so yeah, like with the fact that he's a spoiled rat, I know a lot of them did say that he was a spoiled kid, and they always mentioned that he wanted this deer. And honestly, like, he had it coming to him. He was so spoiled that he gets mad and kills his dad. Like, yeah, you deserve some sort of punishment for that, right? But just like you said, I did enjoy that other story too, because it shows like a more like innocent side, right? This is kind of what we see with like most of these different legends, where like these people were wronged in some way, whereas like that first one, he's spoiled, he kind of brought it upon himself, which makes sense with the whole curse thing. But it kind of rubbed me the wrong way to know that, okay, his dad kills his mom, and he decides obviously like, oh, okay, I'm gonna retaliate against him too, because I mean that's my mom, right? So he took matters into his own hands, took care of his dad, and then the grandpa's like, well, you're not gonna kill my son, so I'm gonna kill you, you know, or like do this to you, I'm gonna curse you. I mean, like, that's just kind of foul, you know, like, why didn't he care about his own son killing his, daughter-in-law, basically? Like this is weird to me. So yeah, that one didn't really sit right to me. But also, when I was like researching, there were like other variations too, where it said, one of them specifically has to deal with the father again, where I guess the son, he comes home from a long day at work, and when he comes home, he finds that his father, you know, trigger warning here, you guys, sexual assault. His father is, you know, raping his fiance or his girlfriend, and he gets consumed with this rage, just like we see in the other iterations, and he just kills his father right then and there. And then the same story goes, you know, the grandfather finds out, he ties him up, and he whips him and all that stuff, right? So that one is another one as well, which I believe, you know, it paints a different story. It makes you see these individuals in a different light, much like, you know, La Llorona, where she was wronged in this way. You know, regardless of which story you're familiar with, she's still wronged, and she reacts to that. Another one that I found was the fact that, very similar, you know, it's the same thing with like the father. Instead, this time, he was just so fed up with like the fiance for some reason, and he kills her. So he kills his son's fiance, and then the son, you know, same story, kills the dad. Grandfather steps in, curses him. So there's lots of different ones. It's I know I mentioned this is something that's very familiar with people like in Venezuela and Colombia. I know we're not personally Colombian or Venezuelan, we're Mexican, so like we heard these stories along the line, you know, just listening to like different podcasts and stuff, but it's still very interesting.
I don't know, I can't remember if we mentioned the podcast we often will listen to, but we really like the podcast Susto, if you guys want to ever check them out, you know. He has a really cool podcast. But I remember that's the first time I heard about El Silbón, and I thought it was a really interesting story, and I did like a small deep dive, you know, outside of that episode, and so that's like the first time I ever heard of it, and that was pretty recently.
Yeah, like Samantha said, I mean, that podcast Susto, it's really good, you know. Shout out to Susto, shout out to Aiden, he's the creator of it, right? So check him out. But yeah, he focuses on Latin American folklore, right? And that's what his whole podcast is surrounded by. And he did an episode on El Silbón, and that was the first time we heard about it. And it was so interesting to hear, because it's something that is very famous in these countries. And I mean, like, you think, oh, like everybody knows about La Llorona and everything like that, but like ever since I heard this episode on Susto, I started seeing it like everywhere. There's other podcasts that I listened to covered it, and these people, they're not Latin American, they're not Latinos, they're white, you know. So like it's starting to spread everywhere, and I'm seeing stories on YouTube and everything like that. So like I like that, like these stories are starting to spread everywhere, and people are learning about these different, you know, cultures and their, you know, beliefs. So it's very interesting to see. Okay, so one thing I thought was interesting when I was doing my research was I came across this YouTube channel, which Samantha and I have seen multiple times, and like it's very interesting if you guys haven't heard of it, but it's PBS, right? And they had this series called Monstrum, and it is hosted by Dr. Emily Zarka, and she goes in depth onto like these different legends. She's covered La Llorona, you know, I think the Loch Ness Monster, zombies, werewolves, all these different things from different cultures. Some stuff that I had never heard of, some stuff that for sure we're going to end up covering on this podcast. But she did cover El Silbón. And I thought it was very interesting is that when she covered it, she actually spoke with a, I believe it was like a director who he put out basically like this show, or he worked on this show that's on HBO Max. So if you guys have that, you guys can check the show out. It's called Fantasmagorias, and it's a Latin American show that basically it's a animated show that talks about these different Latin American legends, and El Silbón is one of them. So again, if you guys have HBO Max, you guys can go ahead and check that out. It's called Fantasmagorias, and in this one, it tells the same story, right? Where in this one, it's the one that I mentioned, where again, trigger warning, the father does sexually assault the son's fiance, and it shows, the son, he gets mad and he kills him and all this stuff, right? And I find it very interesting because the person she was interviewing that worked on the show, he mentions that like they wanted to get it accurate because he knows that many people have different variations for these stories because it just depends on like where you grew up, right? Or one thing that he said that I was very interesting, right? I never really thought about it. The time period, right? He says that a lot of times these stories, right? These folklores, these legends, they change over time. And he says because the fact that they meet the need for the thing that you want, right? For the thing that you're like searching for. And so he says, in the story where he's talking about, it was a spoiled son. Maybe this could be something that was taught to like children where it's like, okay, this is what happens when you act like a brat or, you're acting up, these things happen to you. And then another thing could be, that whole story where the dad does something to like, the fiance. I mean, that's just very brutal. I don't know where that could, I guess who would be looking for something like that. But I mean, there are people out there that are, just, I guess, bad people, right? But I thought that was very interesting because I never thought of it that way. It's very similar to like, La Llorona where, okay, she was cheated on, so this happened, which I guess that really, goes into that context where, okay, somebody might be searching for this to kind of show, hey, don't cheat because that's going to happen, right? Or another thing for like the kids too, right? Like, oh, look, she's going to get you. And then also like the historical context where we talked about, or you talked about La Malinche. So it meets the needs for the people, and that's where those stories come from, which I thought it was very interesting. But not only that, he talked about actually going to the Los Llanos region, which is basically like the plains region that kind of borders Venezuela and Colombia. And he talked to them. He asked them about the story. So he wanted to get the authentic story, not just something online, over the internet, which I respect it because he's getting this straight from the source, basically.
You were talking about how like these could be like stories like, oh, if you're being a brat, this is going to happen to you. I think it also ties in very well with like the idea of like what he does to people, like his victims when he shows up, when they hear his whistle, like what happens to them, like womanizers, drunks, how you were saying as well. I think that also ties in very well with just like those lessons, I guess. That's
another thing why like I don't know, El Silbón is so cool, I guess, in a sense, or like not really like cool because I mean he I guess he's known to murder people, but the legend is so interesting because it's not your typical legend, right? Most of them have to deal with women, right? Like no matter what it is, whether it's a man or a woman, these different beings. Like La Llorona, she targets, these people and she takes their children, and predominantly we associate that with a woman, right? Like their children are being taken away. Or this happens to this woman, and all these different stories that we hear where women are attacked for one reason or another. El Silbón is different because he doesn't, right? He basically it's associated with, oh, you're a drunk. Generally, it's associated with a man, and the same thing, a womanizer, this man too, and it's, I guess that ties in with the stories like how you had said too, right? So like for whatever you're looking for, so like that deters drunks, and I just think it's crazy, like thinking about that, like he makes a hole in your body and then sucks out the alcohol, right? Because he's reminded of that torture that he received where he got like alcohol poured on his back. But then he's going to take your bones away so that you could follow him for like the rest of eternity trying to get your bones back too. Like it's crazy. And I think it's like that perfect mix where it's like a lesson, but also scary.
Yeah. I know when I originally heard like about him and like I looked at other stories and everything like that, like this story is scary. Like I'm at like just like the whistle alone, like hearing a whistle, like it sounds very close to you and you're like, oh my god, someone's with me, or like someone's like outside my house or something. But then as soon as it starts sounding like it's farther away, like he's actually closer to you. Like, that's scary to think of. Like, just the whistle alone is like a very strong spook factor.
Yeah, and it's very reminiscent of like La Llorona too, right? It kind of shows how like every place has these different creatures or these different beings. I know in my research, a lot of people reference it as like a sort of like male banshee. And the whistle, right? I know I didn't touch on this in the legend itself when I was talking about it, but his whistle was said to be like a very familiar tune. I know I said that. It's supposed to be like the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. That's how it's supposed to be, right? So that whistle is going to sound, very elegant or eloquent, whatever you want to say, right? And it's very familiar to people. It's not going to be very ominous or anything like that. It's not scary, but anything could be scary in the right conditions. And if you think about that late at night, in the dark, there's videos that you can search up on YouTube or, whatever the case is. And these people, are recording late at night and they're in their rooms and they hear this whistling, right? Going through the streets, just like La Llorona would go through the streets and do her cry and everything. And there's just something about that ominous feeling of like, who the hell is whistling this loud at night?
I think going off of just like ending it on that, like on the whistle, we could get into our stories because we have a lot of interesting stories and even a video to go with one of these stories of the whistle that this person heard.
Sounds good. Let's do it.
So this first story comes from, these are all, by the way, all our stories are coming from Reddit, it was kind of hard finding stories, but we did find a good amount on Reddit. If you guys have any stories you guys want to tell us, we promise you will hear it in this episode. We are desperate for your guys' stories. Send them in at our email, send them in on Instagram, anywhere, when you're leaving us a rating or whatever. But if you want to send it in through our email, that's calaveriapod@gmail.com. But let me get into the story. So this first story is from the subreddit r/creepy encounters, and it's from the user Silbón. It's titled, Suspicious Whistling and Banging in the Middle of the Night. So me and my friend were going on a walk around 3 a.m. and I live in a rural/country area. Half city, half county. We went to a field to relax. There are townhomes nearby. It is 3 a.m. and I don't expect much. This place has no history of being dangerous. A burglary happened a few blocks down from where we were, but that was 2 years ago. Since the neighborhood has been quiet, I recently visited an old barn ground that had burned down in the 80s. It's an empty lot. We were just sitting around and talking about our personal lives when we both heard a loud bang maybe a few miles away. Judging from the sound, I indicated that it could potentially have been fireworks. We continued with our conversation. No more than 5 minutes later, we heard what appeared to be a human whistling that seemed to be low-pitched and coming from the right side of the neighborhood. At times it seemed to be close and others seemed to be far. I had a knife on me and challenged the person or thing making the noise. I had told whoever that they should show themselves. No response, so I whistled a high-pitched tone. I immediately got a response back, the same medium-pitched whistle. Not high or low at this point. We continued home, but it seemed as if it was following us. I heard it one last time before going back in the house. I would like some responses indicating that what this could be. Thanks. Please share your experiences.
Okay, and so you tell me, what do you think that was?
I think it was very interesting that, like, they could hear it, like, from far and then close and far and then close. Like, it was kind of just going back and forth. But I found it very, like, kind of scary that, like, for, like, 5 minutes they didn't hear anything. And so the guy just whistles, and then they just hear, like, something replying back, basically, whistling back. Like, that's scary.
Yeah. Yeah, like, that's terrifying. It's, like, kind of like in the movies where they're talking to themselves, like, an echo, and they're just, echo, echo, echo. And then they're like, hey. And then something else, like a different voice responds back, and it's just like, what?
Or, like, in The Conjuring when, like, the clap and everything like that, and then someone else claps back for the yeah.
Yes. Yes, that's a perfect example. Yeah, that story was weird.
And yeah, so that, like, it was kind of hard finding stories that, like, in the story talked about El Silbón, but a lot of the replies in this post would, like, talk about it, like, hey, maybe it's this, maybe it's, like, this legend from Venezuela. Like, a lot of people were just like being like, maybe it's this, or maybe it's like just a ghost that people would, or like not this ghost, but this other creature called like the Whistler, and that would try and lure people in like the woods. And maybe it's that, maybe it's El Silbón, you know, like these people are out really late at night. Not a great idea. But I found that one interesting.
Yeah, I think that's perfect because, I mean, El Silbón is known to be out at night. I mean, most of these creatures are known to be out at night, right? Like, that's kind of where they thrive. So that is interesting, and I think it's cool how, like, it kind of goes down to the fact where we were talking about where he is becoming to, like, be known, basically, by many people outside of Venezuela and Colombia, like, even all the way over here in the U.S., and it's just interesting to see like that he is also like La Llorona, where she can travel. I mean, who knows, he can travel as well. So in that case, let me go on to my story. So my story is from the subreddit r/creepy stories, and it is by the user Jester_18, and that's a Jester with a G, so it may be Gester, I mean, who knows. And it is titled, I Heard El Silbón Whistling. Hello guys, I want to inform you that I forgot to post a story immediately because I was really shocked and I couldn't even talk for a while. Anyways, the following happened when I was in my second house. So this user goes on to explain the legend of El Silbón, and they go on to talk about the fact that El Silbón will either sit inside the house and count bones or go outside and count the bones. And this individual, this shows like I guess another variation of the legend, says that he will either, you know, if nobody in the house hears it, then somebody's gonna die, right? But if people do hear it, that brings good luck, which that's something that I didn't find in my research. I think that's interesting. So let's continue with this. I was in my second house. My second house is pretty far away from my actual town, and it is surrounded by fields. It is also near the sea, so we go there for our summer holidays. I went there for some days so I can clean it a bit because there are many insects dying on our floor, and I forgot to tell you that my aunt is our only neighbor. Anyways, I was sitting on our couch watching my phone when I suddenly heard a whistle behind me. I immediately looked back, but there was nothing behind me. Then I heard the whistling again. I looked in every corner of our house, but nothing. Then I looked out of the window and saw it. It was far away in the field. It was at least 2 feet tall and had a sack on his back with some bones being visible. It looked at me and started to run toward me. Thank God my aunt's bulldog saw it and started barking at it. When it heard the dog, it started running away in a panic. I didn't know about it till I searched in Google and I saw what I was looking at. Thanks for reading. I really hope you will never hear his creepy whistling. Even though I'm not at the second house right now, I went to an organization to get a dog because I felt that next time I wouldn't be so lucky to have my aunt's dog near me. So, what do you think about that one?
I think that ending is pretty like, he definitely like, or not he, sorry.
The user,
the original poster. Yeah, the user. They kind of like read about like El Silbón and was just like, okay, I need to prepare for next time if I see them at their second house or whatever. And so they knew like I need a dog because he's scared of dogs. And so I think it's interesting that they're kind of like preparing for a possible another interaction.
Yeah, I think it's very smart on their part, honestly. And I think, okay, so like what kind of caught me off guard was he said that like it was 2 feet tall. So I'm just assuming that it was very far away, which he didn't look as big, right? Because he's supposed to be very tall. You know, like I mentioned, he's anywhere from 6 to 19 feet tall. So I thought that was weird. But I like how, just like you said, he went right away, went to Google to see what it was, and he found these results right away, and he was convinced. Or I'm sorry, I keep saying he, but this person was very convinced, right? This is El Silbón, and I need to get a dog next time. And very smart on this person for going out and doing that and being protected. Because who knows?
They're being very like proactive about it and everything.
Exactly. You know, like they're not gonna let El Silbón catch them slipping, which I respect it. And I mean, just hearing from like, you know, like the story itself, like judging from what they had said, it does sound like it was him, right? Because of the fact that like the whistle, and it goes back to like, even though it's just a whistle, it could be very ominous in the wrong situation, and it definitely seemed like this was the wrong situation.
I think also the fact that the user like saw the entity that was obviously pretty far away, and they were able to be like recognize it when they looked up like El Silbón, and they're like, yeah, that is what I saw.
Yeah, I think that's a very like perfect indicator right there, because I mean it was probably so fresh in their head that they were able to kind of confirm it right off the bat, which is interesting because I don't know, that wouldn't be the first thing coming to my mind. Like if I seen that, I would just be focused on getting out of there, and I don't even know, honestly. I really don't know how I would react.
Same. I had to just be like calling someone who's like, I'm gonna leave, can someone come pick me up or something?
Yeah, something like that, you know. But hey, I mean, everybody's different. This person obviously is prepared for that, so good on them.
Let me move on to my next story, which is from the subreddit r/x Reddit, and this is a comment to user Romaniac. Their post saying, "What is the creepiest thing that has ever actually happened to you?" And user bingbong1234 responded, "I've been waiting a long time to tell Reddit the full story of the Whistler. The story requires many details, but is unexplainable, creepy, and 100% true. And I also have video evidence. When I was about 8 years old, I was taking my dog for a walk through the neighborhood with my mom. It was maybe 11 p.m. We live next to a swamp/woods area on the edge of our neighborhood in Lansing, Michigan. I remember it being very silent and slightly windy. From down in the swamp, we heard somebody whistling at us. It sounded sort of like a bird, but each whistle was different enough where the lack of consistency made it human-like. The whistle sounded higher, then lower. I can't really describe it. My mom had a concerned, slightly terrified look on her face and grabbed my hand and said that we should go inside quickly. I didn't understand because I was too young, but seeing my mom freak out made me freak out too. After a while, though, I kind of forgot about it. 2 years later, I was taking my dog out again. Late at night, there is a large bush that could easily obscure a person behind it just next to the front door. As I was finishing the walk, the whistling noise started again. Same pitches and same inconsistent human-like tones. As soon as I heard it, a chill went down my spine as I remembered exactly the feeling of seeing my mom terrified, looking down into the swamp at something I couldn't see. Maybe she couldn't see either. I ran inside as fast as possible. Years went by and I thought about it less and less. I told only a handful of people and eventually it just slipped my mind. Fast forward to last summer. I'm 24 years old. I started dating my girl, Sarah. We moved out of South Dakota for work. For Independence Day, we decided to go to Peoria, South Dakota, and watch the fireworks along the bank of Missouri River. There was a free camping spot behind a hospital where you could pitch your tent, hang out, and see the fireworks up the river. We were near the end of the campground and there were very few people around us. And it was getting dark. The fireworks began. They were pretty far away, so the illumination they brought was very little. Thus, we had to sit right at the edge of the river to be able to see them. A huge thunderhead was moving in and a storm was imminent, so the air seemed electric and the wind was picking up. The atmosphere was eerie to say the least. The police boats herded all of the other boats off of the river and had left our area to do that elsewhere. Most of the other campers walked up the river to have a better view of the fireworks, but Sarah and I stayed back and we were drinking PBR, tall boys, and kicking it. Suddenly we heard the sound of a paddle methodically dipping into the water. We saw a figure steering a canoe about 20 meters offshore. Sarah decided to get more beers from the car, leaving me alone to stare at this mystery person. And then, of course, they whistled at me. My entire body froze and was covered in goosebumps. It was the exact same whistler from my childhood, more than a decade earlier. I looked at the figure, but it was much too dark to discern who it could be. They were wearing a hat. When they were perpendicular to the shore from me, they stopped paddling, turned the canoe to face directly at me, and whistled right at me. I was so frightened, I stood up and shouted at them, "Who are you?" They didn't say anything, just whistled a couple more times, turned the canoe 180 degrees, and paddled out of sight. I'm a videographer, so I already had my camera by my side and was taking videos of the fireworks. As the canoe was almost out of sight, I grabbed my camera and got a shot of them whistling as they went away.
Oh, God.
When Sarah came back... Exactly, that's scary. When Sarah came back from getting beers, she was very confused as to why I was so freaked out. When I explained, she was freaked out a bit too. I was convinced we would both be murdered that night. How did this whistling person follow me after 14 years, all the way to South Dakota? Was it coincidence? Why was it the same whistling noise? Who was that person and where did they go? So many questions still unanswered. To this day, I am more afraid of being outside in the dark where I might hear that whistle again. I'm open to any explanations, and if there are any interests, I will find a plug and edit a little video of fireworks and the whistling noise, and the canoe disappearing. And I'll play that the audio of it, and it's very interesting, like the tone of the whistles and everything like that. But I'll play it for you guys right now.
You whistling? Is it you? Stop it.
What in the hell?
I know, like that's just
God.
oh
And
my
this person
god,
is just
that's scary.
in the canoe as well, like another canoe as well. And I'm assuming obviously this at night, right? So like there's fireworks going off. They don't go out during the day.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, like in the video, you could see that like it's like the sun is about to set. Like it's very, very dark, and you can kind of see the fireworks. I was trying to like zoom in to look at like see if I could see the canoe facing them or like going away, because I think that's what the poster said like they had recorded, and so I was trying to get that or trying to zoom in and like look for it, but I couldn't see it. But we're definitely gonna link it down in the description of this episode if you guys want to check that out yourselves, because it's creepy, like very weird. Like you heard like the whistles and everything like that in it, and you could hear like the water, the paddling and everything. Like it's creepy.
Oh man, yeah, I'm excited to see this video then, because I haven't seen it, right? Like I mentioned before, we don't really share our stories with each other until the episode itself, so I'm interested to see what is going on. Like that is crazy. So you mentioned that you're not able to like kind of make out a figure or anything, right? Like it's just you could tell it's coming from in front of them, but you can't see a person there, right?
Yeah, at least I couldn't see like the canoe that was like going away. Maybe it was just because like my brightness wasn't up enough, I guess, and I just couldn't see it because it's a pretty dark video, you know. Like you can't really see much. Like the poster said, there wasn't much light coming from the fireworks. It was just dark, kind of.
Okay, yeah, that is crazy. Honestly, that's I don't know. I think that's another thing, is that it's one thing to guess to see, I mean, from what we're assuming is El Silbón, right? But then another thing to be like in the water too, because like what would you do in that instance? You know, you can only paddle so fast or swim so fast in general, so that's weird. Another thing I wanted to say too is like, what the hell is El Silbón doing in Michigan, and he mentioned like South Dakota? Like what is he doing? You know, like oh god, I just think that's crazy.
And so like I kind of mentioned at the end that the poster, they were looking for any explanations, and a lot of people from Venezuela was really like, or this specific this like one of the first few comments from, and this is from Gashura. I don't know how to say it. It's like kind of a weird name, but they say like they give him like a link to like El Silbón's whole story, his whole spiel, you know, like what he does. And they think they even looked like a video of it, like the whistle. But when I clicked on it, like I couldn't see it. But they say like, I'm from Venezuela, like this sounds like you're seeing him, which is like weird because he's over there in South Dakota and he's hearing.
Yeah, that's weird. I think another thing too, I mean, the fact that he's seen it, he says like 14 years earlier too, when he was younger, and it's the same distinct whistle. I don't know. That is just a perfect like horror movie, like, you know, moment right there. So that is crazy. That's a great story. Okay, so my next story comes from the subreddit r/paranormal by the user IDK What This Is with 4 S's. Okay, and it is titled The Whistler ? Hey guys, this is the first time I've used Reddit, so I just wanted to share my story and get some advice. A year ago, me and my family heard whistling that sounded like it was coming from our basement. It was at night and it eventually went away, so we figured it was nothing after we checked and we didn't see anything. Later that night, or I guess early morning, it came back, so we called the police. They didn't find anything, so we brushed it off. Since then, I have heard whistling like the one before about 4 or 5 times. The sound of the whistle was drawn out from high to low, with some slight variations. Now I just heard it a week ago and have been doing some research. I've come up with an entity called El Silbón, or something like that, nicknamed the Whistler. I don't know if this is real or not, and I would love to hear some opinions. Also, I should mention that we have a motion light in our backyard for our dogs, and it's been turning on a lot recently in the middle of the night. It's not triggered by small animals, which is about the extent of the wildlife we get in our neighborhood, so I'm not sure what to make of that. Oh, and side note, I live in Michigan. Is there any animals that whistle like that? Please let me know your thoughts. Thanks. Okay, so again, the Whistler in Michigan, right? Or El Silbón in Michigan again. Like, what is going on in Michigan?
I don't know, like, maybe Michigan is just like a hot spot for him. He's kind of just chilling there sometimes.
It could be, right? I mean, maybe he likes to get out. But, so this one was weird because it ties kind of like two of the things that people say about him, where he will like enter your house one way or another, right? Either counting the bones, but also he's in here whistling, right? So that is weird too. And for them to like actually take it as far as like to be so scared about it, they call the police and there's nothing there. You know, you would think maybe there was an intruder or somebody doing this multiple times. They'd leave something, some sort of trace.
They must have been like very sure that that person, like that thing, was inside of their house to have called the cops and just to like double check. So that's scary.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like, I mean, just even hearing that the first time, like I know at first you kind of would think like, oh, did I hear that correctly? But you know, one time, okay, I get it, but like 2 or 3 more times, I would definitely be like, oh hell, like there's something or somebody down there. I know my first instinct would probably be like a person, right? Because I wouldn't just jump to a conclusion and be like, oh, paranormal. Like, no, I'd probably think like there's somebody down there. So I get it, calling the cops right away, but then it just continues to happen even after that. And the whole thing with the motion light, I don't know what's going on with this user or, you know, whatever the case may be, but I don't know. I think this is probably a sign that something is going on, and it isn't normal.
I'll go ahead and move on to my last story. And this is from the subreddit r/paranormal again. And this is from user QMWB Forever. It's titled The Whistling Man. This is my very first ever Reddit post. Apologies for all the things I'm supposed to pre-apologize for. I'm not sure if I added the correct flair either. Thanks. My house is haunted like a lot of houses are. I lived in the same house my whole life. I'm 39. I grew up here with my brothers. They moved and I didn't. I inherited the house and live here now. I'm guessing I'll probably end up a ghost in this house too one day. But that's another subject. I've had many interactions with my not of this plane roommates, and it started very young, but I didn't realize how young until one day I was having a conversation with my mom when I was a teenager, and I convinced her that I was seeing and experiencing things in the house. I told her I saw a figure of a tall man wearing a long coat and top hat, and I told her sometimes I heard whistling. The first time I heard it, I whistled back, and they whistled back, so I started sleeping with my TV on to not hear the whistling and just to have a distraction. She turned white as a sheet. She told me when I was little I would whistle in my room, and I've always been a good whistler since I started young, like 2 or 3. So one day she asked Tiny Me, "Who taught you how to whistle?" And I said, the man in the hat."
Oh no.
Yeah. That's as a parent, I'd be like, what the heck?
Yeah, no.
At that time, she thought I was just a creepy, weird little kid. But now we know it was the man who taught me how to whistle. I still hear the occasional whistle.
Okay, that story is weird. I don't think this is like El Silbón.
I don't think so
but
either.
I think it's interesting. Yeah, I think it's interesting how it's like another spirit that just kind of whistles. But I guess it's pretty cool because it taught the kid how to whistle, right? But that is very, very weird.
Mm-hmm. One thing I did want to talk about is that when I was looking for like stories, I ended up having to just look for like whistling stories and kind of just like narrow it down, because a lot of the times like it wasn't specific people saying like, oh, I know I encountered El Silbón. Like they were just looking for an explanation because they never heard of like a ghost or an entity whistling and everything like that. So they were like curious to see, is this a thing, or is there an explanation to this? A lot of people are like, do I have tinnitus or something like that? Like, is there something wrong with my ears? Am I like, just what is going on? And so I thought this story was kind of just a story about like kind of like a ghost maybe this kid was seeing, and it's maybe not El Silbón, but I just thought it was interesting that the ghost was also wearing a hat, also had like pretty different attire.
I mean, yeah, like that's pretty recognizable, right? I mean, El Silbón is known to wear like a hat for one, and to whistle, so those are pretty big things right there. Like if it's just like a random person or something that you think obviously is not from this world and it's doing these same things, like it's kind of hard not to make that correlation there, because I haven't heard of many spirits whistling or singing or anything like that, so what exactly could be going on, and like who could this be? But again, like this is another thing. I think maybe where you were having trouble finding these stories is because of the fact that people say that he is basically just centralized in Venezuela and Colombia, right? Especially in the Los Llanos region. So I thought that's why it's like so fascinating that people are like hearing this in like Michigan, South Dakota, or it's just in the States in general. Like it's so weird. But I mean, who's to say that he can't go away or he can't venture out?
So another thing is that I kind of forgot to bring up when I was talking about the one with the video and like the actual, like you could actually hear the whistle and everything like that. I was like looking through r/Venezuela's subreddit to see if like anyone talked about it, anything, like look for just any stories I could possibly find. And I did find just one where it's just like American experience El Silbón for the first time or something like that, like writes about their experience with him. And it was that post, like they had linked it, they talked about it in that post. I can't remember if I saved it or not, but that's how I found that one. Like people in Venezuela like were just like, this is like, they kind of were just like, this is an encounter. So I guess that was like the closest I could find to some story from people that were in Venezuela kind of just being like, oh, look at this or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a perfect example. I mean, why we're not able to find as many stories, because the spirit kind of just is confined to it, right? I mean, there's very, very few that are kind of being like, yeah, this is El Silbón, or, whatever the case may be. Whereas these other ones are kind of just like, yeah, there's this weird whistling going on. I don't know what it is. So maybe El Silbón kind of does stick to his one location, but I mean, every once in a while he could venture out, because I just think that whole boat one that or the canoe one that you shared, that is too creepy and like too much of a coincidence just to kind of like overlook and be like, oh, that's something else, or that's just some random person. Like, no, there's definitely something going on. Okay, so my final story is from the subreddit r/paranormal, and is by the user lost-profession-3668. And it is titled, "Should I seek an explanation or should I be prepared?" It was 5:30 a.m. in the morning. While I am in bed watching Netflix, the sun should be up any minute now. I hear an ear-piercing whistle. Sound started from towards my right ear, gradually filling the entire room. I could tell it's definitely a male, and it was as if somebody was whistling from right in the middle of the goddamn room. The sound was short-lived, to about like seconds, I guess. While I'm trying to interpret and understand what the F it was, I could feel the rush of adrenaline. I was confused and scared shitless. It was as if fear was the only emotion left to experience. It should be some asshole roaming the streets. I live in the first floor, at least 10 yards from the road. It must be my husky. He was sleeping soundly. It must be my sibling, as we share the same room, but he too was sleeping, drooling over his pillow. And it ain't no birds. I know the difference. Birds don't coo like that unless the sun is up. While all the other facts failed to give me an explanation, I started to check all the other rooms. My parents were fast asleep. No sign of anything that could explain the sound. It was so clear that I stopped moving and froze. The mind is trying to give me all sorts of explanations while my heart is struck and does not comply. Turn to Google for some explanations. Angels, omens, fucking tinnitus. Neither of them. Until I finally came across a user that posted something similar on r/no-sleep. His story was much worse, that while reading, my eyes went all over the dark corners of my room. I was so scared that I could hear my own heart pounding. People in the comments mentioned it was El Silbón. I did some background and its origins from Venezuela. I live in India. What's it doing crossing over continents? Maybe there really is an explanation. Maybe I am hearing stuff. I hope. It's now 6:25 a.m. and I'm still unable to leave my bed.
That's scary. Just like the way the whistle filled the room.
I think that's interesting too, like how he was just basically consumed by this sound, right? There's not many things that can do that. I mean, the only thing that I can really think of, like, you know, like these headphones, right? Noise canceling headphones or whatever, where you kind of feel like, oh, you're in, you know, you're a part of the music, but like it's early in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning. Sounds like, you know, they were woken up by this thing. So like, I doubt this is coming from some headphones, and obviously they would have mentioned something like that. It was just kind of like an analogy, but still, like, very weird. And India, you know, what is he doing in India? That's a valid question.
Yeah. I think it's very interesting that, like, there's definitely different entities that are similar to, like, El Silbón and just, like, hearing a whistle, I guess. But I know when I was looking at, like, other stories to possibly read for this, that's what I was kind of coming up against, like, or coming up with. People were talking about, like, other entities, like, these, like, gnome-like things that whistle and try to lure people away from their houses, usually, like, children. I've seen, like, people talk about, like, oh, it's possibly that. But then a lot of other people also just always just kind of go to, like, no, it's El Silbón, you know, like, they always kind of just pinpoint it on him.
Right. Okay, so that kind of sounded like duendes, right there. But, I mean, who's to say that there isn't just, you know, multiple of these entities? Because La Llorona, right, she's like a variation of this woman in white, which, I mean, there's many, many ones, whether it's a hitchhiker or somebody, you know, at a cemetery or a hospital, anywhere, literally, there's multiple women in white all over. So who's to say that the same couldn't be said for this whistling entity, this whistling man, right?
Exactly.
And it just could be that El Silbón is probably the most popular of them all, or, you know, he could be starting this trend of whistling entities. And
another thing I want to talk about in the story is that, like, the whistle really just, like, grabbed his full attention. And I saw, like, in a couple, I want to say, like, 2 other stories that I was debating on reading for this episode. They talked about, like, a whistle literally, like, so loud in their head that it literally threw them back onto their feet. Like, they fell from whatever they were doing. They fell back onto, like, their butt, basically, because of just how, like, surprising and loud, like, this whistle was to them.
Yeah, so there's definitely something going on.
And so I kind of thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I definitely think there's something going on there because, like, that's just obviously not natural. There's no way, like, sound can kind of go into your brain. So it does kind of make you think, like, I mean, not necessarily a supernatural sense, but something otherworldly, like kind of like a transmission into your brain sort of thing, right? So, like, I mean, obviously we don't have the power to do that stuff, so what could? And I think that's a very valid question.
Is it paranormal? Is it supernatural?
Yeah, I mean, very, very valid questions. Like, I guess, you know, we will never know. El Silbón is just over here toying with everybody, it seems like. And if it's not him, then maybe there's many other entities that we need to discover soon, I guess. But yeah, so that is our final story. But don't worry, because just like always, we like to give you guys something to talk about, right? And so for this last thing, we were given something submitted, I guess you could say, by our cousin Morgan. And if you guys don't remember, she was mentioned in our first episode that we ever put out with the story that we told of hearing somebody singing at like the middle of the night and our dog just kind of like reacting weird to it. So yeah, that was our cousin. She was there as well. But anyways, if you guys haven't heard that, check it out. It's our first episode. But she texted me earlier this week and she told me that her Nina recently went to the Winchester Mystery House. And for those of you that don't know, the Winchester Mystery House is a house in San Jose. It is known to be haunted. It is known to be owned by Sarah Winchester, who just decided to build and build and build and never stop building her home because she was so scared that the spirits of these people who were killed by Winchester bullets, Winchester, rifles, were haunting her or were going to get after her. So she just decided to build and not stop. And she would build rooms that led to nowhere, stairs that went into the wall, doors that literally just dropped to like the ground from like the second story, just unnecessary things because she wanted to trap the spirits or confuse the spirits. So her Nina went here. She was snapping pictures, and I shared these with Samantha. So the first picture she showed, it was basically like an orb, right? Like this entity, and it looks really weird because everything about the picture looks very normal, and then there's just like this streak across from it, and like that like flash of like white light in the middle, and it doesn't look like a glare to me. I mean, Samantha, you saw the picture. What do you think about it?
I definitely I see the orb. I see like the picture looks very like normal like at first glance, but when you kind of look at it, like it definitely like there's something off about it. Like there's something kind of like obstructing almost. Like you see the orb, it kind of looks like the camera was messed with a bit, maybe. I don't know. Yeah,
and I mean, again, like it doesn't look like a glare to me because right next to where this little like orb thing is a window, and it is sunny outside. So you would think if it's a glare, it'd be coming out through there, but it's off to the side next to like a portrait and like some curtains. So it's very interesting. But the second picture she sent us, I thought it was weird. Now look, you might look at this picture and think like, okay, this person did this on purpose or whatever. But look, I urge you to just try to do this. Just try to do it, please. This picture is so weird. She told me that her Nina was snapping a bunch of pictures, right? Because she obviously, this is known to be haunted. This is not just a place where it's just like, oh yeah, it's haunted. No, they sell it as a haunted house basically too, right? Like you can take night tours to go see after dark tours, VIP tours where they let you into like the most haunted places of the house. So like it's known, people know it for being like that. And we personally went actually. And when we did go, there is a room where Sarah Winchester was known to conduct her seances. And let me tell you, I tried to capture something too, right? I was snapping pictures, I was doing this and that. I really didn't see anything. But when we got into that room, it was so cold. That temperature drop was insane. Like, Samantha can attest to it too. I mean, we were all there, like I said. We took like a family trip to there. It was weird. I never experienced a temperature drop like that before, so there's definitely stuff going on in this house. But let me get back to the story. She was snapping pictures. Finally, when she was deciding to like look at them to see whether or not she had caught something, she noticed that one of them was different than the others. While all the other pictures looked very normal, nothing wrong with them, this one picture just looked warped. Like it literally, best way I can imagine it is like imagine if your phone was recording from the inside of the dryer, just spinning in a circle, and that's literally what the picture looks like. And I honestly cannot make out what room they are in or what's in there, because the center, it kind of seems like it's still sort of like in place, kind of tilted off to the side, and then the surrounding is just like a tornado around it, just like, I guess like a hurricane, I guess, if that makes sense. Like it is just swirled around, and I really don't know what to make of it. But according to my cousin, right, her Nina just saw the picture like that, reviewing the pictures, and that's what she saw. I don't know what that could be. I mean, I know we say spirits are able to like mess with technology. They're able to, kill batteries, do that. And so who's to say that they can't manipulate cameras?
I know when I looked at the picture first, like I was just like, what even is going on? Like it looks exactly like the explanation you gave. Like you put your phone in like a dryer and it's spinning around like that. That's what it looks like. But like you could still see like kind of like the after image of like what this is. Like it just looks kind of like it's still, but then like everything around it is spinning somehow.
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, I'm sure you could edit a picture to make it look like that, but if that's the only picture that came out like that, like after you took it, I don't know. I don't know what explanation you have for that other than, a spirit messing or tampering with your technology. So, I mean, yeah, we'll go ahead and add those pictures to our Instagram at the end of the Instagram post. And you guys could follow us at calaveriapod on Instagram, as well as on TikTok and Twitter. Again, that's calaveriapod. And if you have a story to tell, send them in at calaveriapod@gmail.com. Like Samantha mentioned earlier, we want to hear you guys' stories. We want to be able to tell, something other than these Reddit stories because, I mean, it's Reddit, right? Who knows if they're real or not? These are all allegedly true stories. But if they're coming from you guys, we know it's true, right? We know you guys are here. We're a family. This is all things supernatural. So we're, excited to see what you guys have. And again, we promise you share your story with us. We're going to share your story with everybody else. And if you guys want to support the show, feel free to leave a 5-star rating on whatever podcasting app you're listening on. And if you're able to leave a review, please leave us a review. It helps us a lot. It helps us get our podcast out there to everybody else. And also, share the podcast with people who would enjoy the genre. Like we said, spooky season's coming up. So, yeah, be on the lookout for that Halloween episode. And if there's nothing else, I think that's it. Peace.
Bye.